All right.
All right, let's get started.
Real quick. Yep. 3, 2, 1. Okay. We're live.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the February 7th, 2023 meeting of the Governance Committee for the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees. The meeting is being held in person with some committee members participating remotely. At this time, I will conduct a roll call attendance to determine if a quorum is present. Please clearly respond present via WebEx or present in person when your name is called. I am here, Courtney Nicolato, present via WebEx. Vice Chair Jake Placencia.
Present via WebEx.
Charles Fogarty.
Present via WebEx.
Matt Lenz.
Present via WebEx.
Christine Heenan. David Caprio. I think I see David.
David's
present via WebEx. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. President Parlange.
Present WebEx.
Great, a quorum is present. Also, Board Chair Margot Cook and Vice Chair Mike McNally are also present and participated as invited guests. So welcome to you both. We'll call the meeting to order now that a quorum is present. A reminder to all members for the benefit of our audience and the note taker, please clearly identify yourself, whether you comment, make a motion, or a second to a motion. Participants using WebEx are required to keep cameras on, as remote members and all persons present at the meeting location must be clearly audible and visible to each other. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Rhode Island occupies traditional homeland of the Narragansett Nation and the Niantic people. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion that the Governance Committee approve the minutes of its October 17th, 2022 committee meeting?
Charlie Fogarty, so moved.
Matt Lenz, seconded.
Great, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion to approve the minutes of October 17th, 2022 meeting of the Governance Committee is approved. The next item on the agenda is agenda item number 2, a number of discussion items. First is around the URI Board of Trustees appointment. I'm going to defer to Chair Cook, who will speak to this item.
Sorry, I was just eating lunch. So where we are in the process is we sent a letter on behalf of the board to the governor about a month and a half ago that basically asked for a meeting to discuss the process of appointing and reappointing board members. We will have a couple of openings. A couple of people have said to me that they don't want to, they will not be renewing their appointments. I have not heard officially back from the governor. My expectation, obviously it's past February 1. We all were 1, 2, or 3 year members. And so even the 3-year members are beyond the Feb 1 appointment period. My expectation is that the governor is pretty involved. He had to get his budget out. He's involved in a number of other initiatives right now. He will get back to us at some point. I think he is very agreeable on reappointing the board. I think he has a few ideas on those 2 open spots. And so my understanding is that at some point he'll come back to us, or our office will come back to us, and we'll have a meeting with Mark and me and the governor. We have a number of names that some of you have submitted to us that Courtney and Mark and I have gone through. So when that meeting happens, we'll be ready with some names that we think will be appropriate for the board. This is the first time that we're going to do this with this governor, so it's not totally clear what the process is, but I have confidence that that who we want on the board, that wants to be on the board and continue to serve, will continue to serve, and we'll see how we do with the couple of openings that we have. What I've really laid out is that what's important to the university is that whoever sits in these spots has a clear understanding of the objectives of the university, that they come in with just the university hat on and no other conflicts of interest, that they understand that the role as trustee requires work. I mean, everybody here does a great job in participating in the work of the board. It's not just a nice appointment and you get to, come and listen to things. There's work to do, and that whoever sits in these seats really has the desire to understand what's good for the university. So it's a work in process, and Courtney and I will keep you posted on what we hear back from the governor's office.
Courtney,
Yes, sir.
Mario, can I ask a question? Has the governor's office given a staff liaison to the board? I know in past governors used to have policy analysts that had covered certain areas, certain departments that all.
No, you're exactly right, and I had a great relationship. Yeah, I had a great relationship with Kevin Gallagher. Kevin was fantastic. I don't have that same liaison. There was someone early on, actually before the governor was reelected. I don't have that person now. So sometimes it's Tony Alfonso, but it's not a consistent relationship. When we do get this meeting, Charlie, that's a great question that I plan to ask. I think it's, typically it's somebody that has education in their purview, but I haven't gotten that person.
Yeah, I think that's, going forward, I think that's important. I know the governor's kind of laying everything out for his first full term, but I think, that certainly would be helpful to you, Margot, to us, and so forth.
Absolutely. Thanks, Charlie. And any insight you have on what I just talked about, if you want to talk, offline, or if you have some advice, that'd be great.
Great. Any questions for Margot about where we are in the process?
No, just a comment, Margaret. There probably will be an exception to the statement you made that everybody that wants to continue will continue.
That is true, Mike. I'm trying to, as long as this gets lengthened out, I still have you.
Well, good. Well, we're looking forward to our continued work with the governor. I know both Mark and I sit on the Education Commission as well, so we work with a number of different entities in the governor's team. So we'll continue to have great conversations and move it along. And everyone is now expired, but we will continue to do the good work. Margot did note, and I think it's important to reinforce, whoever chooses to take on this role and serve on this board, this is not a board that sits idly by. This is a board who is focused on the growth and trajectory of the university, and that takes work and sharing of your time and your talents and your treasures to the university. So. Next item on the agenda is a student trustee appointment. Mark, you knocked it out of the park last year. So any thoughts that you have as you're thinking about our next student trustee?
Well, thanks. So we have time, of course. Hannah is still through graduation, is a student. So we have a procedure in place now with the student senate. Our Vice President for Student Affairs, Ellen Reynolds, has relayed with the Student Senate, and I think what they are going to do is they're going to bring 3 nominations or something like that, a small number of nominations, and then I, with a small number of the executive committee, will interview, talk, and then we will make a recommendation to the board. So that's the procedure we're planning to follow this year. So it's an engagement of the Student Senate and then the executive committee.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, on timing, is the appointment made after the April meeting that this person would start in June?
Ideally, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Any questions on the process or on Mark's plan?
Hannah, I believe, did start officially in the
June,
June.
yeah, the
At
June
the end of June, when we have the last meeting of the year, so to speak.
Yep. And Hannah's also mentioned she's looking forward to transitioning and supporting the next person. She doesn't want to go just yet, but supporting the next person when they take on the role, and I really appreciate that.
Yep.
Any questions for Mark? All right, good. That process continues. Next is around annual retreat planning. That will be in June. Our June meeting is often, at least a portion of it, is focused on our annual retreat. I know that the President's Executive Council has kind of put some thoughts together on some ideas and concepts for the retreat. Alyssa, do you want to walk through some kind of high-level thinking from the group?
Sure. Actually, I think that maybe, do you want to speak to it, Abby, since I think you've had a little more of the conversation on it and know the person you have in mind? Would you like to jump in?
I'm happy to. What the President's Executive Council discussed was an idea about having a speaker either perhaps the night before the meeting or at the retreat itself to talk about the future of higher education. And we had a few categories of speakers we were thinking about. Maybe somebody who has a pulse on the Washington, D.C. scene and sort of the national higher education landscape, or perhaps, higher education thought leaders in other areas, prior presidents. I think there are a few that we could choose from. But then the key portion would be following that with a facilitated discussion with our new provost, Barb Wolf, who's on the call, and our deans to talk about how they're thinking about the future of higher education and how it is affecting their work, especially as they look to implement our strategic plan. So that was an idea that we had coalesced around with the Executive Council, but of course, we're open to other ideas from members of the committee.
That's great. I really love the idea of having that panel discussion with deans and kind of hearing how folks are visioning the strategic plan and the implementation of the plan according to their colleges. I think is a really worthwhile conversation for sure. But let me open it up to the committee. Any thoughts either around what some of the ideas being proposed, anything additional that you think is really important for the board to spend some concentrated time on?
Courtney, my one thing would be, I've just been given a lot of thought from the articles I read about student mental health. I just think it's a problem that we're still facing across the country. So I still would like to learn more about that.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Any additional thoughts? Charlie?
Courtney, I don't think it's happening here, but that publication we get, the Chronicle of Higher Ed that comes in, has, lately been talking a lot about an effort at radically changing governance structures at state universities. So I don't know if our legislative people are keeping track in case anybody puts in something that might, impact, not just governance structure, but the relationship between the board and the university itself. But that's something we might want to keep an eye on, if not, maybe not having something to discuss unless we need to, but just kind of keeping an eye on that, because it seems like it's one of those trends that's kind of spreading around the country in certain areas.
Great point.
Charlie, I've been thinking about that too. We're fortunate that we're in a state that respectful of the university, but it's very worrisome. Mm-hmm. And maybe hearing I'm not sure who would, who we would point to come talk about it, but we live in Florida half the year, and boy, I'm watching what's happening here, and it's not good.
You're ground zero.
Yeah,
exactly.
I love the idea of even, kind of governance trends that are happening and how we manage the board. What should we be doing differently above and beyond what we're seeing as scary trends, but also are there anything new that can make us more effective, more supportive of the university, whatever it might be. I'd love to think through that a little bit more. Any other ideas or things that you want to get out of time together? I know last year a big part of our conversations, we wanted to get to know each other too, outside of the boardroom. So any other additional thoughts or kind of priorities as we think about the retreat?
Courtney, I thought, I don't remember if we did it at the governance meeting, but we've done small group discussions. I think those are effective, and then you have the group report out. So maybe there's a couple topics, or maybe it's in conjunction with that panel discussion, and we can talk a little bit more about the strategic plan. But I find that people are more apt to freely talk when they're in small groups, and it facilitates good relationships.
I love that. Great. All right. Anything else that folks want to contribute? All right. As for next steps, Abby and Alyssa, is the thought process to put a draft agenda for the retreat together and look into the speaker that you talked about and all that, and we can report back in April kind of what the next steps on the agenda will look like?
Absolutely. Yep.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. And if there's any additional thoughts and ideas that come out after the fact, please let Abby and Alyssa know as well. We want to make sure that those are considered. All right. The next item on the agenda is item 3, action items. There are a few action items. Specifically, there is a policy, a Board of Trustees policy on the approval and execution of contracts and other binding documents. This would be a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. The Institutional Risk and Compliance Committee reviewed this draft policy at their January 31st, 2023 meeting. And I will ask Kara and Dan to share their thoughts, and then we'll share a little bit about the conversation that happened at IRCC. So, Kara?
Sure. It'll be Dan.
Kara's not here today.
I'm sorry, I can't see in there. So, hi, Dan.
This is Abby.
Hi. Right.
Hi, Abby.
So, thanks. I thought what I would do is I'd take a few minutes and give you a little background on the policy and then some of the policy basics.
Dan, is it possible to pull a microphone closer because you're pretty soft?
I can face this way?
Oh, no, it's right up here.
Above
the microphone's there.
Well, then I'm going to look straight up. So, is that better if I stand back here? You're able to hear me better?
I think you want to get closer but louder.
To this one?
Yeah.
How's that? Does that work? Is that better, Alyssa?
It's better, yep.
No, the microphone.
Okay.
But these are both. Okay. I'll stand up and I will try to be loud. So I'll give you a little background on this policy. So currently the university relies on two different things for managing signature authority at the university. The first one is that we have a signature policy that lives in the Office of Budget and Financial Planning. This policy provides for signature authority by name, not by title, by name. That's very important. And it also includes authorizations for both internal and external transactions. And originally the policy was penned in 1983. It's been updated. It's not that old, but that's its original date. So it's definitely time for a refresh. But the second thing is that we are using board resolutions now to add in and remove individuals from the list of people with signature authorization. So we want to sort of move away from that. So this policy fixes those issues, but also this policy will add guidance for contract review here at the university. The contract review is prior to its execution, and we don't have any sort of centralized guidance right now. So this policy pulls together that guidance. The policy was developed by Associate Legal Counsel Lauren Jensen starting last summer, and she and I worked on it through the fall. I think it's fair to say it's been widely reviewed across the university, especially in sort of contract-heavy areas like facilities, purchasing, and information technology. It was also reviewed by the Faculty Senate Executive Committee. So also prior to this, it was reviewed by the President's Executive Council and also the Administrative Policy Committee, which approved it to bring it here. I'm going to go over there. You show me, all right. So where do you want me to
You can go right here.
Here. Right here where you are. Is that better? Okay,
Just
good.
so you won't be blocked.
Yep, that's fine. So let me turn for a second to the policy itself, and I'll go through a few of the major tenets of it. So one, as I said, it creates signature authority by title and by role instead of name, and it also creates a delegation for signature authority, which is also important. It also provides rules for how contracts between the university and third parties are reviewed at the university prior to their execution. So first, signature authorization. So this relates specifically to the execution of the document itself. Signature authorization looks like this in the policy. We have the chair of the Board of Trustees and the president who have broad signature authority. The board chair can authorize to execute all contracts approved by the board. The president is authorized to execute essentially any other contract that, quote, promotes the objectives of the university and or the Board of Trustees and is consistent with established policies, procedures, and regulations. Also, all vice presidents have signature authority for contracts within their respective divisions. The director of athletics has signature authority within that division. General counsel has authority to execute contracts broadly relating to provisions of legal services and also attorney-client privilege. This is important because these are the only positions that can bind the university to an outside party, or if those are delegated. So that's important. But the other thing that this policy does is it provides a protocol for review and approval of the transactions related to these documents. It's important to know that approval is not the same thing as executing the contract. Approval relates to the transaction itself. Execution relates to the document. So there are certain thresholds that are laid out where different approvals are required prior to the execution. I'll give you a few examples. They're all in section 3 of the policy. But a few examples is that the president must review and approve all contracts with a financial obligation or exposure greater than $500,000. For the board, it's $5 million, I believe. The vice president for administration has to do so for contracts or obligations over $250,000. And again, this is not the execution, this is just the review. The vice president for research and economic development has to review all contracts related to sponsored awards. So these are just some examples. It's all laid out in section 3. In addition, very quickly, the policy has sections on delegation, contract administration, record retention, conflicts of interest, and there's also a statement on unauthorized commitments or agreements. That's usually where people might go through a click-through agreement without actually having the authorization to do so. One final note, the effective date of this policy on the draft that you have is February 20th, 23. So it's a few days post the board meeting, which gives us the right amount of time to get it in place. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Dan. And I know, Alyssa, when we talked in seeing this for the first time, this is the first time that this governance committee is seeing it, but there is a reason why we'd like to expedite it. Can you just share a little bit as to why?
Sure. A couple things. First of all, we have Barbara now in the position of provost, and what we've done in the past is each time a position has changed, we've had to come to the board with a new vote to update that signature authority vote. Given that, the transition in positions, it's really not efficient at this point to have to come back and do that vote each time with people coming on board. But also we have a number of process changes that are happening that we've sort of been holding on until we can get this policy up, and we want to be able to go out and train people on this new policy and those new processes at the same time. One being a new IT contract manager who's going to be assisting with reviewing IT contracts and really updating some of our protocols and processes around contract review and approval. This really is, really documenting best practices around control of contracts and execution of contracts, and getting out there as soon as we can to train people and make sure there's some discipline around this. There is risk associated with people executing contracts who aren't authorized by the board to do it, and risk that those people may in fact still bind the university even though they haven't been under a position of apparent authority. And by having a board policy that's posted and that says only these people or their delegates may sign contracts, it really defeats any argument that someone would make that the person signing it had apparent authority and that therefore the university is bound. So there's a lot of good reasons that we'd like to get this in place as soon as we can.
That's great. Any questions for Dan, for Alyssa, and then I will turn it over to Matt in 1 second for his feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Dan. Matt, one of the things that the governance committee had talked about is that, while the governance committee is responsible for board-related policies, there are times where there's certain other committees that it'd be important for them to review and take a look at policies and provide any additional feedback that they have. This one's a great example of that. Internal controls, various different things that IRCC, it makes a whole lot of sense for you all to take a look and review. And so you were there at that meeting. Could you provide any context of what IRCC discussed?
Yeah, we didn't really have much to discuss. I thought it was a great presentation and a great overview. So, we were for it. It makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. Any additional questions before we move to a vote? Okay, great. May I have a motion that the governance committee recommend that the Board of Trustees approve the URI Board of Trustees policy on approval and execution of contracts and other binding agreements superseding the University of Rhode Island's approved signature authority on behalf of the University of Rhode Island and the URI Board of Trustees that was effective September 23rd, 2022 as recommended and presented in enclosure 3A.
Matt Lenz, so moved.
Can I get a second?
Placencia, second.
Thank you, Jay. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved. The next item is around the review of President Parlange's appointment of primary university liaisons and university liaisons to committee pursuant of section 5.7 of the bylaws and the recommendation to the URI Board of Trustees. I'll pass it over to the president.
So, Courtney, I'm assuming that everybody received the attachment with the names. Yeah. So maybe I'll quickly go through. So on the executive committee and compensation subcommittee, the primary university liaison is Alyssa Boss, and university liaison second is Anne-Marie Coleman. Academic Affairs and Research Committee, the primary is the University Provost, Barbara Wolf, and then the University Liaison is Peter Snyder. For Finance and Facilities, primary is Abigail Ryder, and then University Liaison, Barbara Wolf. Governance, as we know, is Alyssa Boss and Abby Benson. Institutional Risk and Compliance Committee, primary is Abigail Ryder, University Alyssa Boss, and then for Student Life and Athletics, the primary university is the Vice President for Student Affairs, Ellen Reynolds, and University Liaison Athletic Director, Thor Bjorn. And then we have the two special sponsored research committee. Primary is Peter Snyder, VP Research, and University Liaison is Barbara Wolf, Provost. And for the real estate committee, the primary is Abby Ryder, VP for Administration and Finance, and University Liaison is Ellen Reynolds.
Great, thanks, Mark. And just a quick question, Mark. I know that this was an opportunity for you with Barbara joining us as provost and others to kind of take a look at all the committees. Do you want to provide kind of just a little bit of feedback as to what, how you thought through the assignments?
Well, basically I was looking at who was primary responsible. Obviously, we have a team. We have the executive committee. These are essentially members of the executive committee of the university. So, student life, there's lots of people that worry about it, but VP Student Affairs is the primary, obviously, research committee, then the vice president for research for the real estate, then obviously the vice president for facilities comes in. So basically, it was, who's responsible, who's got primary roles, academic affairs, then obviously it's the chief academic officer, so the provost, finance and facilities, that's really the title of Abby Ryder. So it was really, I think more than anything, it was to make sure that we had the direct people responsible in their work that were selected.
Great. Any questions for President Parlange?
Obviously, I should add that the board secretary will still play obviously a key role with all the committees.
No, this was good, and it's good to understand the reason behind it. But so my question around this is not a policy or anything we have to really change, but based on what we just did with this last policy, where we made changes to the titles and removed the names of the individuals, does it make sense for us to have the titles of the individuals that are the liaisons versus primary contact instead of the names, or does it matter? Just a thought.
Great point.
Yeah, Jay, I think that's actually a good point. There may, as you all know, one of the key members who's primary for a number of committees, including the real estate committee, Abby Ryder, and the finance and facilities, Abby Ryder. Abby, as you all know, has formally announced that she will be retiring from the University of Rhode Island. So it's obviously there's going to be a change there in that role. But I'm also, reflecting, where we go in the future in terms of scope and titles and all those, so those things can change. So I'm not maybe right now ready to give definitions of all the positions, if that makes sense, Jay. Yeah.
Sense.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Jay. Any additional questions or comments? Okay. Hearing none, may I have a motion that the Governance Committee recommend that the Board of Trustees accept the President's appointments of primary university liaisons and university liaisons to committees as presented and set forth in enclosure 3B.
Charlie Fogarty, so moved.
Thanks, Charlie.
Second.
Thank you, Jay. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved. The next item on the agenda is item number 4, adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I heard Jay for primary, Matt for secondary. Thank you. I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved. The next URI Board of Trustees Governance Committee meeting is tentatively scheduled for April 2023. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
True. Record time.
Thank you.
Courtney, you're more efficient than Neil was today.